I believe Gandhi will continue to be relevant in India today, whether you talk about unity, harmony, and that comes from love for all, genuine concern for poor, deprived, low caste, you know. His economic policies were very different because the times were very different. But he started from the ground up. He talked about rural development. He talked about basic needs, water, sanitation, health. You know, I think he had a lot of these things figured out. Yeah. Unfortunately, we have lost track of him. To us, he's somebody we can look up to once in a while, talk about it, pray, and then go about cheating on our income tax, not treating our drivers right, hassling our cook, you know, not respecting poor, not respecting labor, not cleaning our bathrooms. When I became chairman Telecom Commission in 1980 something, 88 or so, the first thing I was given was a key to chairman's bathroom. I refused it. I said, I don't want chairman's bathroom. Because I know that chairman's bathroom is going to be clean and everybody else's bathroom is going to be not very clean. So there are a whole lot of issues to me that represent Gandhi. You know, this is my view. I think Gandhi is very relevant today, but Gandhi can only be made relevant by each one of us going inside ourselves and asking those questions and not expecting somebody else to do what we expect them to do. We need to learn to love all. Okay? And I think Gandhian is a way of life. And he had shown us the right way to live as Indian, as human beings. And we have lost track. That's all.
Thank you very much, Sam. I think you've provided us with some real insights.
Can I just add one more thing?
Yes.
I also believe Gandhi was the man of information age. Openness, accessibility, connectivity, networking, democratization, decentralization is on one hand Gandhian, on the other hand information technology.
Yes, he was certainly the master of communications. As you have put it, no one understood the use of symbols better than Gandhi. I mean, even Nehru thought that it was a trifle eccentric to choose the salt issue to kick off the civil disobedience movement. But then he quickly realized that Gandhi had a point.
Absolutely.
And that is what, galvanized the whole country. So, Gandhi really represents a whole system of deep sort of values, a way of life, as you put it. And I think we need to shift from simply garlanding his portrait on anniversaries and begin to sort of imbibe, those values. Vinay, you are both a historian, but you've also worked a great deal on, questions of development. And perhaps I should ask you, was Gandhi an anti-modern figure? And is that kind of an anti-modernism something that we ought to celebrate in this, what we call sometimes our postmodern age?
Well, let me begin by saying that I rather agree with much of what Sam has said, if not all of it. And I want to add a simple observation to it before I make a few specific points. The observation is that Gandhi was, I think, an extraordinarily creative person. And I think this is all the more interesting in view of the fact that the scholarship, and I speak as somebody who's a scholar, writer, teacher, on Gandhi has been appallingly poor. Because I think the main problem is that his entire life is surrounded by cliches, that is in how we try to understand and address Gandhi. Right? And when I say extraordinarily creative genius, I mean, for example, when he's put on trial on charges of sedition, on charges of disaffection against the colonial state in 1922, he pleads guilty. Now, if he had pleaded not guilty, the colonial state would know how to deal with him. You see, and similarly, in early 1930, when he's thinking about how should he reinitiate Satyagraha, he writes a letter to the Viceroy. I mean, it's an extraordinary letter because no revolutionary writes a letter to the opponent telling him exactly what he's going to do, right? I mean, a revolutionary usually disguises his plans because from Gandhi's point of view, Satyagraha and openness have a fundamental relationship to each other, right? And so he writes a letter and says, I'm going to actually march to Dandi and I'm going to break a salt law, a particular law, not laws in general, because Gandhi, of course, is a great respecter of the laws, as we know, right? So this is what I mean when I say that Gandhi is a man of extraordinarily creative, passionate intensity, if I may put it this way. I think the specific points I want to make are the following. I mean, one could say a great deal about it, but I'll restrict myself to 3 points, and each of them is dense in a certain way, but I'll be rather brief with all 3. Number one, I think that India is, I mean, if I look at India at this particular juncture, and in part it will answer the question that you had posed about modernism and anti-modern, Gandhi being anti-modern. I think one of the most interesting ways to look at where India is today is to understand that there is a tussle between the idea of India as a nation state and the idea of India as a civilization. And these are two rather different things. They may be congruent in some small respects, but they're rather different things. Now, there is a profound irony in part in this, because even though Gandhi is celebrated as the father of the nation, and even though he is clearly, in some fundamental respects, the principal architect of the independence struggle, whatever the debates about his role in it precisely, but notwithstanding his commitment to the nationalist struggle, I think one needs to also understand that no one was less attached to the idea of a nation state than Gandhi himself. Right? I mean, this is a man who spoke principally in what I would describe as civilizational idioms. And I think the most unfortunate thing is that if we look at this juncture today, I think that what has happened is that the idea of India as a nation state is beginning to predominate over the idea of India as a civilization. And in this respect, it seems to me that we have left Gandhi far behind. And when I say this, what I mean is that the nation state only really understands the language of realpolitik. It's a zero-sum game. So if Pakistan wins, India loses. If India wins, Pakistan loses. Right? I mean, that's essentially the nature of the nation state system that we have today. I think Gandhian thinking is radically different from that, and I think Gandhi was a person who was fundamentally, if I may put it this way, steeped in the civilizational ethos of India. So to that extent, I would suggest that yes, I mean, there are strands of anti-modernism in it, because there is an intricate relationship between modernity and the nation state, you know, right? But on the other hand, it's very clear, and this brings me to my second point, that Gandhi embraced a radically different conception of cosmopolitanism as well, right? I mean, I think that one of the perils of living in India from the colonial period down to the present day is that we have been completely seduced, as Gandhi put it in his Swaraj in 1909, by the West. I think this seduction continues down to the present day. I mean, the furthest we can look to is, okay, it used to be London, now maybe it's New York, maybe there are a few other European capitals, but Africa, for example, this does not occupy the horizon of the Indian middle class, intelligentsia, and elite an iota. And I think Gandhi had a very, very different understanding of the West. I think it's quite significant that he never visited the United States. Also, he received over 200 invitations to go to the US. And he was very clear why he didn't want to go to the West. In part, I mean, to the US in particular, in part it was because he said that there was enough work to be done in India, that in fact ahimsa really, he was not quite convinced that practitioners of ahimsa really in India had understood what was happening, much less was there a possibility that would happen back in the United States. And so what I'm suggesting here is that I think that Gandhi's understanding and relationship with the West and with the world at large is, I think, very, very different. And I think that we have much to learn from that. And finally, my third small point, there used to be a slogan that became immensely popular, and that was, and it was sometimes, by the way, attributed, and as I'm going to suggest, entirely mistakenly to Gandhi, namely, act globally, think locally. Okay? Right? Now I'm going to, act
locally.
Act locally and think globally.
Right.
And I want to suggest to you that Gandhi, in fact, actually exemplified the exact opposite. By which I mean, in other words, think locally, that one has to understand that the fundamental colonization that has taken place and that continues to take place is the colonization of knowledge systems. That is, the way in which we think about the world, what counts for knowledge, what doesn't count for knowledge, okay? What constitutes a body of knowledge? What are the ways in which we assess knowledge? The ways in which we set up universities, for example, all of these kinds of things. Gandhi's fundamental premise, in my view, is that we have to, in fact, think locally. We have to be immersed, and that doesn't mean in the knowledge systems, which is not a matter of being an indigenous. That is, you don't become a nativist by doing that. What he's trying to suggest, rather, is that we have to have some kind of rootedness, and the rootedness in part comes from ways of thinking about the world which in fact form some kind of resistance to the dominant model.